Shintaro is a friendless loser who hides in his apartment all day. However, everything changes when an adorable angel breaks into his apartment and begs to stay in exchange for making him happy however she can.
私にできることならどんなことでも。
It all starts when the angel, Toa, is sent to Earth with the orders of studying mankind, and she is awestruck by the beauty when she arrives at the human world, thinking about how people take the sights for granted, which brought her so much happiness, as she vows to understand humans better. Meanwhile, Shintaro starts making his way home after a long day at work when he comes across a stray kitten, thinking about what a lonely loser he was who could not even keep a pet. Eventually arriving at his studio apartment where he had recently moved away from his parents to work and study, falling onto the bed in exhaustion as soon as he got home. When he wakes up the next day, the first thing he does is pour himself some milk, but his jaw drops when he notices the apartment window wide open, panicking about his virgin possessions being potentially stolen from his apartment. But when he reaches the window, he is shaken up by the sight of Toa asleep on his balcony, which causes him to spill some creamy milk all over her. Jolting her awake, Toa introduces herself and comes clean about not having a place to sleep, which is why she crashed on his balcony. And the flustered Shintaro rushes to give her some of his clothes after she had done undressing, showing off her goddess tier honkers. And she insists on cooking him dinner, but finds no ingredients, and instead offers to clean his apartment only to stumble upon a steamy magazine the Virgin had hidden away. When the two finally get to talking, Toa reveals how she was an angel sent to Earth by a higher power to observe mankind, which leads Shintaro to believe that he had let a mental patient into his home, and he goes into panic mode, dragging Toa outside with him as he headed to work, asking her to return home. However, he was not able to focus at work the entire day, and instead stayed in a trance which even his manager noticed until it was time to start walking back to his apartment, thinking about how glad he was that the bootleg angel was gone, only to find Toa walking with a creepy old man on the street. When asked about where she was going, Toa said that the man had offered her to come with him to a shady hotel so they could do some adult origami, leaving the old fart with a red face. Instinctively, Shintaro grabs Toa by her hand and rushes her back to his apartment, scolding her for trusting strangers, but all the fatigue catches up to him, and he collapses on the ground, only to wake up in his own bed with Toa near his feet. While he was asleep, Toa had put together a bread and milk porridge with tons of sugar to make Shintaro feel better, which she feeds him by hand. That was when Toa reveals that she had carried him home, which concerned Shintaro, but she said that it was no big deal since she had flown, which leaves Shintaro in doubt until Toa mogs him by revealing her angel wings, which finally leads to him accepting her claims and offering to let her stay if she truly had no place to return to. The next day, Shintaro wakes up and immediately finds his virgin mode activated when he sees Toa curled up next to him, only for her to say that there was only one bed and resolves to buy a new bed as soon as possible, heading to the convenience store for breakfast where Toa gets too excited over a store deal and her wings pop out, causing Shintaro to hide her until she returns to normal, which leads her to explain how her wings emerged whenever her emotions ran high, as she declares that she had read about Earth in a guidebook for angels. This makes Shintaro curious, who asks her what an angel's duties were, and Toa tells him that they had to deliver God's word to humans and help them on their journey from Earth to heaven, while also keeping humans happy, but she comes clean about not knowing what human happiness entailed, which was why she was sent to Earth in the first place. But the deep conversation comes to a halt as Toa raves about the banging steamed buns, asking Shintaro to feed her those every single day, causing him to panic about his allowance and how it would never cover meals for two, and him ultimately shopping for groceries and household essentials with Toa, who is excited like a schoolgirl on a field trip after seeing the large crowds and bustling atmosphere of the mall. And despite Shintaro telling her to stay close, she leaps away and gushes over a printed cat mug that she really wants, but she felt like she was imposing and put it back. Shintaro later lets her shop for new clothes which were in his budget after a crowd had gathered near Toa, mistaking her for a goth loli cosplayer, and Toa is over the moon with the clothes she tries on and thinks about how kind Shintaro had been to her, vowing to make him happy in whatever way he desired, leading nearby listeners to be horrified. And after a store manager mistakes Shintaro and Toa for a couple, he is quick to rush her out of the store and back to their apartment, where Shintaro collapses from carrying the heavy bags. But Toa is energized over the fun trip and practically swoons when she finds the cat mug hidden among their purchases, which Shintaro had secretly bought for her. The two of them go to sleep in the same bed once more because in his excitement, he had forgotten to buy a new bed. The next day, Toa tells Shintaro about how she had made her way to his balcony the other night, with her gazing at a passing train, recalling descriptions of human transportation from her angel book. Mesmerized by its speed, pressing super close and eventually gagging a passenger who glimpses her hovering outside the window, causing her to head to higher ground where she could be alone atop a building. Contemplating her mission, which according to the guidebook stated that angels have two methods to approach humans, which were to either reveal themselves dramatically with radiant light and spread wings, or conceal their divinity and blend in, and while Toa was unsure which to choose, she observes the bustling streets below with people absorbed in their routine, and the thought of interrupting them feels intrusive, so she eventually decides on option number 2. Before she can go about her divine duties, fatigue weighs on her, and with no shelter, she drifts until flying past an unlocked window in a grand mansion, which was Shintaro's apartment complex, and assuming that the room was unused, she slips inside to rest only to be found by Shintaro the next day. After Shintaro has heard the full story about his cookie new roommate, all he can do is be relieved that she was unharmed, until that evening when he rejoices as the stunning master chef level meal that Toa had cooked up. While it was a simple meal of store-bought ingredients transformed into warm dishes, Shintaro is obsessed after resorting to convenience store meals for so long, particularly by the seasoned potatoes, thinking about how he could get used to someone cooking for him. Toa is overjoyed when he praises her cooking and admits that she learned from the guidebook, leading him to reflect on the promise that she had made to keep him happy and how her presence was already bringing about a positive change in his life. But Toa notices his pause and worries that he dislikes the food, but Shintaro reassures her and hesitantly offers to help her in return. But Toa declines, saying that being allowed to live rent-free in the Virgin Cove was more than enough, but eventually grows a pair and asks for a favor after dinner, which is to teach her how to use the bath, which Shintaro gladly does as he guides her through using the bath, detailing each step, which includes the simp's crash course on closing the curtain, adjusting the dial, and filling the tub. Toa thanks him, and once she begins washing, Shintaro's cool guy mask crumbles as the reality of sharing his home with a gorgeous girl sends his mind spiraling as he imagines her juicy peach and bear milkers in the bath, eventually trying to distract himself with TV, only for the virgin thoughts to invade his headspace once again, causing him to slap his goofy self back to the present and scold himself to focus, using an upcoming English exam as a flimsy excuse, which gets yeeted out the window when he has to go number 1. Toa screams when he walks into the bathroom with her in her birthday suit after having forgotten that the bathroom was occupied, but then offers to hide behind the shower curtain while he used the toilet, but the blood to his trouser meat had killed his urgency, and when he later goes to take a bath, he thinks about setting some ground rules and designated bathroom times to avoid the not-so-unfortunate accidents in the future. But the same thing happens the next day when Shintaro wakes up deprived of sleep and heads to the bathroom, only for Toa to walk in and catch a glimpse of his little guy. The two of them brush it off, and are later having breakfast when Shintaro notes that it was his 3rd day living with his quirky roommate when he noticed that it was time to head to school. While Toa begged to come along and keep him company, Shintaro turned her down and told her to spend the day watching television until he was done, arguing that it was his duty as a student to study, just like her duty was to educate and make humans happy. Toa eventually gives in and Shintaro starts walking to school when his friend, Shuichi, pops up behind him with a Final Destination level jump scare. But before Shintaro can fully react, their other friend, Tsumugi, shows up, and she and Shuichi notice how pale and ghost-like Shintaro looked, and he lies about just having to work overtime. Later that day, the 3 friends sit together at lunchtime and Tsumugi asks if Shintaro was just going to have some vegetable juice for lunch, which he confirms because he had eaten a boatload for breakfast, which he could not disclose to his friends, and Tsumugi shyly offers to cook an extra lunch for him if he had trouble getting his macros in between work and school. But before Shintaro can respond, he notices Toa stalking him from the window and jumps up, whispering to her to meet him on the roof, where he gives her an earful about showing up despite his warnings. But he simmers down when he learns that she had gotten worried about him being hungry and prepared a lunch for him, and he asks if Toa would like to eat with him, which she gladly agrees to. As they eat, Shintaro thinks about how it was alright since Toa had made an effort to stay discreet and not a lot of people had noticed her, and she had even gone through the trouble of making him more of the potatoes he had loved the previous day. Toa leaves him be after lunch and heads back to their apartment. That evening, when Shintaro returns, he apologizes to Toa for his reaction at school and thanks her for the goated lunch that she had prepared, which she dismisses as nothing. though she regrets flying so openly, and Shintaro agrees, saying that the wings would shock any pleb who happened to be passing by. And that is when he notices that the laundry had already been done, and the apartment was clean thanks to Toa. But he is left stunned when he learns that she had washed his filthy Gunner underwear as well, which even his mom barely tolerated to do by that point. And his jaw only drops deeper when he finds an embroidered bear that Toa had fixed up to conceal a hole in his stinky boxers, which leads Shintaro to firmly declare that he would take care of washing his underwear from then on. Meanwhile, Tsugumi soaks in the bath at her home with a red face, thinking about how she had hallucinated that Shintaro was with a girl who had angel wings, and scolds herself for not working up the balls to ask Shintaro if she could prepare lunch for him, and builds a resolve to ask him the next day. However, Toa is hurt that Shintaro had chosen to sleep on the floor, and her mind went crazy ex-girlfriend mode as she started asking him if he hated her, but Shintaro reassured her and reminded her of personal space and boundaries. But her mood only gets worse when he reminds her that he had work after school and he would not be home until really late, which made Toa shed some tears. But Shintaro cheers her up by talking a big game of being the luckiest virgin alive, because he gets to come home to Toa's delicious cooking, and then leaves for school. When lunchtime arrived at school, Shuichi and Tsugumi are brutally mocked by the homemade lunch that Shintaro had brought before Tsugumi can even offer to cook for her crush. And Shintaro comes up with a flimsy excuse about having rescued an old lady from getting obliterated by truck-kun, and she had made the lunch for him. But Tsugumi clocks him when he opens the lunchbox to reveal a heart-shaped omelet and suspects that a girl had made the lunch for him. But he bails before she can confirm her worst nightmare. As he's walking feeling like a complete loser, a self-proclaimed fortune teller stops him and warns him about girl trouble heading his way before trying to swindle thousands of yen out of him, but Shintaro runs away from the old hag and heads to work, where the manager reminds him that he would be working with the new hire from today, and Shintaro ruins their first meeting by walking in on the girl, Null, changing, and the sight of the cherry design undies send him into a horndog frenzy.
Yeah, boy.
Before he gets slapped by the flustered Null, who eventually introduces herself, and Shintaro tried to lighten the mood by asking if she was born of Christmas due to her name, but his joke falls flat. Noel and Shintaro finish their shifts and are about to head home when the manager asks them to try out the new parfaits he had left for them in the employee fridge. And when the two head downstairs, seeing the cherry parfait reminds Shintaro of Noel's underwear, which Noel catches on and gets super embarrassed by, causing a snowstorm to appear out of nowhere, which Shintaro thinks is a cooler malfunction, but Noel reveals that she is a Yuki-onna, the mythical snow woman from Japanese folklore, who could conjure storms whenever she got embarrassed or her emotions were heightened, and to her surprise, Shintaro believes her since he had an angel at home, so a snow woman was not out of the question, which seems to calm her down as the two of them run off to avoid freezing the restaurant and find a park bench to enjoy their parfaits on. There, Noel unravels about her years of loneliness because her family had carried the Snow Woman's powers for generations, and to avoid triggering her power, she had turned into a waste of space who binged anime and manga all day with no friends, and this part-time job was her attempt to connect to people, but Shintaro had ruined it. Shintaro calls Noel brave for trying to reconnect with society, and this brings her to tears, and she asks if they could be friends, which Shintaro gladly agrees to. But their sweet moment is cut short when he notices a white feather dropping to the ground and sees Toa flying above Noel. And it gets even worse for the loser when Tsugumi, who had left to get some ice cream, accidentally catches a peep of the bizarre scene and realizes that her mind had not been playing tricks when she saw Toa with wings. The chaotic encounter between the four escalates as questions fly, and Tsugumi admits she saw Toa's wings at school but dismissed it as exhaustion, while Toa, who is oblivious to the tension, cheerfully explains she flew to find Shintaro because he was late and asks if he's fine with peppers in their omelet rice for dinner, and Noel is fixated on the wings, demanding confirmation they're real, and Shintaro caves and tells them to put a sock in it because they were being too much to handle, and then he tries damage control, urging everyone to pretend nothing happened, but Tsugumi declines, telling him that she could not simply unsee what she had seen, and Shintaro realizes that logic would not work when explaining mythical creatures. When Tsugumi presses her, Toa confirms she's an angel sent to study humans on Earth, which fascinates Noel, who found Toa adorable and a complete contrast to her stoic image of angels, and she compliments Toa by comparing her to her favorite anime and game characters. Common sense slaps Tsumugi across the face as she is flustered over all the female attention Shintaro was getting, and she pieces together the strange appearance of Toa with the cutesy lunchbox he had brought the other day. And while she is hurt that Shintaro hid it, she promises to keep it a secret. but not before getting her fill and asking Toa why she chose Shintaro, only to be met with a bland response of falling asleep in his balcony, which pisses her off, and she gives Shintaro an earful about bending over backwards for strangers. Trying to get her mind off Toa, Tsumugi turns to Noel, who was famous as the Ice Queen in the school corridors because of her cold attitude towards everyone. But Shintaro intervenes before Noel can blizzard it up all over again and explains that they worked the same job together. This leads to Noel asking if Toa and Tsumugi were his friends, which is soon confirmed, but Tsumugi is hurt over the imbalance of calling the other two bimbos by their first names and her by her last. But she cannot feel sad for long because Noel jumps up and proudly declares that she was a snow woman, which Toa and Tsumugi laugh at until she conjures up a small storm which leaves them stunned. And Noel argues that she revealed her secret to Toa and Tsumugi because she now considered them friends and friends did not have secrets between them, which made Tsumugi left out as she blurted that she was a bedwetter until she was in the 5th grade, leaving everyone speechless. But Toa is in awe over her honesty, and the three girls bond and Toa lets both of them touch her wings before Tsugumi tells her to call her by her first name. And then she heads back home with Shintaro, who is exhausted after dealing with 3 manic pixie girls after work. And Toa worries that he was angry over her reckless appearance, but Shintaro puts her mind at ease and reminds her that he was not angry and simply wished for her to stay safe, which makes Toa remark on his kindness and how he attracted the right kind of people because of his pure heart. This puts Shintaro at ease until he jolts awake from a nightmare the next day where some men in suits had come to kidnap the supernatural angel and ice woman that he was hiding in his apartment. But Toa confirms the sleep-deprived loser that it was just a dream and he heads to school, only to run into Tsumugi, who was in even worse shape than him, not because of the exposure to supernatural creatures, but because she imagined her beloved Shintaro getting close with other women, leading her to bluntly ask Shintaro if he was dating either Toa or Noel, which he firmly shut down, relieving Tsumugi of her jealous Yandir misery. Just then, Shuichi overhears them and asks about Toa, but Tsumugi lies, saying that she was a distant relative of Shintaro's staying with him and making his lunches, and Shuichi asks that Toa make his lunches too, but stops when Tsumugi tells him to stuff it where the sun don't shine. Later, once he is done with classes, Shintaro runs into Noel waiting for him by the shoe lockers, asking him to hang out with her since they were now buddies, and Shintaro reminds her that they both had to work, which gets her drier than a raisin, and she leaves, saying their first hangout was not going to be a walk to work. At the restaurant, Noel reveals her true colors as a friendless loser with her out-of-pocket friendship proposal ambushes to the point where the manager asks if the two of them are dating because Noel had gone as far as to demand being put on the same shifts as Shintaro for the next month. Shintaro feels even worse when Toa and Tsugumi show up with their ulterior motive of keeping an eye on the loser as he goes about his workday, bonding over cold drinks and melon soda in the meantime, with Tsugumi thinking about how perfectly Toa had fit herself into Shintaro's life and when she goes to the bathroom. Toa starts serving customers until Shintaro stops her, coming clean about not wanting to be a burden and being the reason that Shintaro was working while being a student, but he consoles her and tells her that he wanted to experience the work life while in school, which cheers her up. Meanwhile, their manager pulls Noel aside, telling her that her attitude was too cheery and she needed to tone it down, which ticks the bipolar Ice Queen off as she becomes cold and declares that she could not be friends with Shintaro while at work, and asks the manager to remove her from all the shifts in the next month when he was working, amusing the manager, who thought the sorry loser had gotten dumped in a day. The next night, Shintaro noticed many changes in his daily life since Toa came to live with him. The most obvious difference was a rice cooker which sat beside the television that had replaced his usual microwavable rice packs, and he found its placement odd, as it was not in the kitchen where such appliances normally belonged, but Toa explained that his broke boy kitchen had no available space or power outlets, which Shintaro humbly understood since that was precisely why the loser had never used one before, and when Toa insists the location by the TV was practical for serving rice, Shintaro decides that it was fine as long as she did not mind the unconventional setup. And that same evening, curiosity got the better of Shintaro, and he asked Toa what angels typically ate in heaven, and she gags him as she describes abundant food growing on heavenly trees, which included not just fruits and nuts, but hot meals ready for picking. Meanwhile, the whole concept struck Shintaro as both fantastical and appealing, and Toa added that cooking had been her hobby even in heaven, which explained her skill to Shintaro in the kitchen, and when his bowl emptied, Toa offered more rice, but Shintaro declined, getting up to serve himself since the cooker was conveniently nearby. Moving him to admit the placement did make things easier. Meanwhile, in her room, Tsugumi was busy thinking about Shintaro more than usual as she recalled him mentioning plans to take Toa somewhere, and his concern about her lacking a transit smart card, and when he asked her advice about purchasing one for Toa. Tsugumi suggested starting with paper tickets first so Toa could learn the system, which caused Shintaro to appreciate the practical idea. When she was alone with her thoughts later, Tsugumi imagined what it would be like to receive a smart card from Shintaro, envisioning it becoming a treasured family heirloom passed down through the Dispo-Bimbo generations. Her mind wandered to previous conversations with Shintaro about his living situation and how his parents had moved abroad for work. But he chose to stay in Japan because he only spoke Japanese and wanted to attend high school there while living in his aunt's apartment rather than a dorm, having convinced his parents to let him live independently, and the desperate Tsugumi felt grateful to Shintaro's aunt for making it possible for them to reunite as classmates after all these years. And when Shuichi chimed in, warning Shintaro to keep his independent living situation secret to avoid unwanted visitors, Tsugumi agreed proudly, though inside she felt special being among the few who knew this personal detail about Shintaro, whose openness with them made her feel special, reinforcing her growing love for him. Yet these warm feelings were often followed with sadness when she thought about Toa and Noel's presence in his life, leading her down a spiral of regret over not confessing her feelings sooner, before these overpowered baddies had entered the picture. Later at her home, Tsugumi's mother noticed her distracted state, and when pressed, Tsugumi joked about possibly being descended from some mythical creature, which her mom was quick to shut down and said that being normal required effort too. But Tsugumi brushed this off, trying to stroke her own confidence since she wanted to get closer to Shintaro and wished he might return her feelings. And when her younger brother interrupted, asking for snacks, she found her chance when their mother remembered a donut shop coupon she had won and gave it to Tsugumi instead, who imagined using it with Shintaro, soaking her undies. However, the next day at school, Shuichi discovered the bakery coupon in Tsugumi's possession before she could grow a pair and ask Shintaro out, and in his excitement, he suggested they all go together after school, but then remembered his cleaning duties and club meeting, which Tsugumi initially saw this as another failed opportunity, but then realized it meant she and Shintaro would go alone together. Shintaro felt bad about using the coupon without Shuichi, but Tsugumi assured him it was fine, secretly thrilled to be all alone with her potential boy toy. Before they left, they stopped at the library first, where Shintaro browsed books about angels and other mythical creatures, and his newfound interest stemmed from realizing how little he knew about the supernatural beings that had entered his life, and Tsugumi found his earnest curiosity endearing, though she teased him about setting flags by researching such topics. As they read, Shintaro grew sleepy from the dense material, eventually going to sleep beside her, and horn-dog Tsugumi took the opportunity to admire his peaceful expression, finally admitting to herself the feelings she held for Shintaro. And by the time they woke up, it was raining cats and dogs, trapping them in the library longer than planned. Tsugumi was too hot inside to let her date be cancelled and ran into the rain yelling for Shintaro to follow her, and when they finally left, Tsugumi gave her umbrella to a child in need, leaving her to share Shintaro's with the close proximity, sending electric signals to her nether regions, though Shintaro remained oblivious, focused on getting to the bakery before it closed. Their time together eating donuts felt quite ordinary to the two, and was a stark contrast to the supernatural people that had recently entered Shintaro's life. The next day, Shintaro had another obstacle to overcome, which was walking home from school with Noel, and while Shintaro initially worried about conversation topics, Noel filled the silence with enthusiastic nerd ramblings about her favorite anime and manga, which put Shintaro at ease until her social awkwardness showed when she brought up the idea of shared diaries between friends, a concept that she had misunderstood from stories, but Shintaro gently corrected her like a Chad, which hyped up Noam even more, and her excitement about their first friend outing turned up a notch when she bought them ice cream. Shintaro thought about how, despite being a snow woman, she complained about brain freeze, making him laugh when he realized he had expected her to be immune to cold. And Noel later confessed she had stayed up planning their time together, nervous and excited for her first real friend experience. She nearly wets herself when Shintaro walks her almost to her home and says that they would see each other again soon. And later at home, while changing, she smiles at the ice cream wrapper she had saved from their friend date. The following day was peaceful morning with sunlight spilling softly into the apartment, casting warm gold across the room, while Toa hummed to herself as she moved around the kitchen, preparing a familiar, comforting dish of stewed vegetables which happened to be Shintaro's favorite, when a strange sound outside on the balcony broke her rhythm, and when Toa went to check it out, her jaw dropped to the floor as she saw a dusty little angel named Shu outside. Upon seeing her, Shu squealed Toa's name and hugged her tightly, but Toa was confused over Shu's appearance and asked what she was doing there, to which Shu admitted that she had flubbed her landing and was now covered in dust outside a broke boy's apartment, and after checking her for injuries, Toa declared that it was bath time to get Shu squeaky clean. Later, Shintaro sat next to the two angels as Toa recounted the visit, and Shu introduced herself as an angel who was junior to Toa, quickly grabbing Toa and making a quick getaway because the broke boy apartment was reeking of loser, but Shintaro said that flying out of the balcony would attract unwanted attention. But she does not calm down until Toa offers her some milk in pure busted vine fashion, while Shintaro whispered about being unfamiliar with angels loving milk so much. Toa keeps bringing up her master Shintaro, who had done so much for her, but she fails to connect the dots that Shintaro was the strange man sitting right next to them, and starts getting pissed off at Toa for bending over backwards for a lowly human. But Toa gushes like a schoolgirl about the wonderful things she was learning with Shintaro, which only ticks Shu off more. Once calmer, Shu whined like a brat to get Toa to return with her. But Toa explained she had been sent to Earth to learn about humans, and Shu argued that staying in a tiny room was not the way to do it. But Shintaro said it was dangerous outside for a baddie like Toa to traverse alone, which made Shu snap about how Toa deserved better than a virgin loser, and then turned to Shintaro, accusing him of having doubts about living with an angel, but the simp Shintaro simply shook his head while saying that he enjoyed the surprises she brought to his boring daily life, only for Shu to call him a common pleb. But Shintaro only smiled, saying he appreciated how much Toa cared, and then Shu insisted humans were liars and freaks who always tried to have their way with pretty girls. But Toa grabbed her nuts and shouted in protest, defending Shintaro as kind and trustworthy, which causes Shu, who was near tears, to call Toa a jerk and run off, and when Toa and Shintaro chase after her, they eventually find her on the roof since angels felt at home at high places, and after Toa cheers her up, she turns to Shintaro telling him how she still considered him a loser, but Toa must have seen something in him to choose him as her master and mentor, which made Shintaro relieved. After a heartfelt hug, Shu's necklace lit up with a timer as if she was about to liberate the Roman Empire when a voice announced her return in 60 seconds, and while Shu begged to stay, she soon disappeared with a poof like a cheap magic trick. Once the whiny brat was gone, Toa admitted Shu's words had affected her about not doing enough to learn about mankind, and Shintaro agreed, suggesting they go out together after dinner each day, so she could safely learn about the outside world. So over the following days, they established a new routine where during their walks, Shintaro taught her basic rules, like waiting for the walking signal at crosswalks, until one evening, as they stood at an intersection, Toa stopped Shintaro from stepping forward too soon, pointing out the signal hadn't changed yet. She smiled triumphantly, and Shintaro agreed, thinking about how the room temp IQ baddie was learning how to navigate the busy human world. One day, Toa got super excited looking at fruit sandwiches on the television, and her jaw dropped to the floor when she learned that the advertisements were real and not fiction, leading to Shintaro proposing a hangout to get some fruit sandwiches, which would also teach Toa how to use the train, something that he had previously delayed because he did not want to leave Toa alone at a train station with weird men. But regardless, the two find themselves stuffing their food holes with the amazing fruit sandwiches and having a date-like day out as they find themselves paddling inside a swan boat after Toa's curiosity got the best of her. But being mistaken for a couple by an old lady activates Shintaro's virgin mode, and he has a strained conversation about the good and bad touches once they are alone and forces Toa to let go of his hand because that was too touchy-feely for the loner to handle so suddenly. Toa is hurt at how Shintaro had started acting like a stranger when she had been there for him through everything recently. However, Toa is there for him when a passing woman knocks Toa down and she falls to the ground like a sad sack of meat, and he thinks about what a jerk he was being to the sweetest girl who had blessed his pathetic life, and the two of them work over their differences and continue with their previous plan to get dango from a nearby store. On their way back, the evening was quiet and calm when Toa asks about dinner, and Shintaro stays mindful of the time and proposes that they both get hot meals from the convenience stores, and after doing so, the two of them return to their apartment complex only to find a woman named Mary passed out outside their door, who wakes up and hurriedly greets Shintaro in a frenzy and then steals their meals and downs them like a goblin once inside his apartment. Shintaro tells Toa that Mary was his aunt who had bought the apartment that they were currently living in, and that she was a manga artist, and when Toa asked about manga, Shintaro pulled up a nearby comic only to leave Mary gagged that he did not own any of the manga that she had written. and then she further dulled the mood by apologizing for devouring their food since she was starved and sleep deprived for the past 3 days because of her busy schedule. As Shintaro's stomach growled audibly, Toa moved to cook, but Mary interrupted by producing a cake from her bag as she revealed it was her birthday. And no one, not even her editor, had acknowledged it, and the admission came with a flow of tears as she confessed to buying her own birthday cake like a sad sap, until the somber moment dissolved into makeshift festivities as Shintaro and Toa sang happy birthday out of pity for the depressed aunt, Toa offering a handkerchief for Mary's tears. It was not until then that the dense Mary questioned Toa's presence between mouthfuls of cake, and Shintaro scrambled for a half-usable excuse about her being a friend on the summer festival planning committee and how the two of them were having a meeting which Mary did not fully buy, and instead teased Shintaro about Toa being an absolute angel, which left him red in the face until he looked like a stale cherry by the time Mary was dredging up embarrassing stories from his childhood about diaper changes. She promises to bring photos next time she came to visit when she saw Toa's eyes light up at the prospect of embarrassing Shintaro clicks. And then Toa went to go make some tea, and Mary remarked again about her being angelic that made Shintaro stiffer than a dude at 6 in the morning, which only got worse when Mary increased her freak factor and offered to wife up Toa to make her a part of the family. Shintaro misunderstood and got red in the face over not wanting to marry Toa, calling her just a friend. Later, when Mary headed into the bathroom, she questioned why Shintaro had 2 brushes if he lived alone, and to avoid the accusations of being a substance abuser and playboy with women, he faked having OCD to avoid spilling the beans, but later, his lie catches up to him when Mary remarks about how late it had gotten, and how they should walk Toa back home, which sends him into a virgin panic over his homeless angel. As the 3 of them walk outside, Toa asks Shintaro what to do, and he tells her to pretend to be dropped off only to fly back home at the balcony where he would let her in. Before she leaves, Mary gets all cozy with Toa and confesses that Shintaro was kind of dense in the head, but he was a good boy, and it would mean a lot to her if Toa came over to play some other time. And Shintaro is relieved that his stupid plan had somehow pulled through. However, his scheme flops when Mary decides to stay the night at his place while Toa watches like an abandoned puppy from the window. However, Mary's editor, the famous Mikiru, who the duo had been talking about just a while ago, barges into Shintaro's apartment late at night and rips Mary a new one, telling her to come back and get her work done, telling her what a pain in the rear she was considering Mikiru's busy schedule, and she then reveals that she had secretly bought a cake and wished Mary, which got her crying like a baby over the sentiment as she forgot all about her earlier birthday festivity depression. Mikiru apologizes to Shintaro for the trouble and leaves with Mary, promising to do a banger job on one of Shintaro's favorite manga series. Once they leave, Shintaro rushes Toa in and apologizes for keeping her in the balcony to the point where she accepts having to sleep there for another night. And then he apologizes for how his aunt had treated her, but Toa smiles thinking about how lively his family was and how lucky she was to be able to see them all together, deepening her understanding of how human bonds worked. The next day, as Shintaro hurries home in anticipation of Toa's master chef cooking, his path crosses with a distressed lowly girl with red eyes fleeing 2 men, and Shintaro's simp instincts propelled him to help her escape, their sprint through streets feeling ripped from a shonen manga. Catching their breath, the girl ends up introducing herself as Lalishka and thanks Shintaro by sniffing him appreciatively, commenting on his pleasant scent like a starved bloodhound. Her explanation for the chase grew increasingly surreal, mentioning vampire hunters and a centuries-old feud with Professor Van Helsing's descendants. Before Shintaro could process this, Lalishka declared herself a vampire of noble Transylvanian lineage as Shintaro mentally facepalmed himself over his harem of supernatural chicks. The sheer dramatic weight of Lalishka's absurd vampire claims came crashing down on Shintaro harder than her dislodged red-colored contacts, which chose the most awkward moment to abandon ship between the brat's monologue about greatness and power, and as the lenses tumbled down her cheeks, she made a sad excuse about dry eyes which had led to the mishap, but she was mumbling not so silently about how she had just lost 1,500 yen worth of new contact lenses, which Shintaro translated as mid-financial priorities rather than authentic vampire credentials. And the single naturally red eye peeking through from behind her eye patch might have salvaged some credibility for her, if not for her immediate pivot to calculating lens replacement costs with coupon crippling cheapness, which made the other fall out as well, revealing her as a sham. Shintaro's internal vampire detection meter swung violently from maybe to elaborate cosplay enthusiast as he found himself trapped in the world's weirdest charity case, unable to ditch this sparkly disaster as Lilishka dragged him to her workplace, which was a maid cafe where the only thing more artificial than the decor was her vampire persona. The virgin loser finally got hold of the communal brain cell and bailed on the weird goth loli before she could turn into an even bigger red flag. And before he knew it, that evening's conversation session where he ended up recapping everything to Toa became an impromptu psychology lecture as Shintaro diagnosed Lilishka's condition as terminal main character syndrome, a tragic affliction where victims believe the universe revolves around their edgy backstory. Toa got really wide-eyed when she heard main character syndrome, which launched Shintaro into a patient and excruciating explanation of how some spoiled lolis believed that the world revolved around them and their fancy ideas, and the conversation continues well into the night until the two of them finally decide to turn in for bed. However, Shintaro is not at ease for long as he wakes up by the distinct sensation of something damp tracing his carotid artery contours on the neck, and to his jaw-dropping shock, it was Lilishka, the partially human equivalent of a stray cat they'd fed once that had not only tracked his scent home, but scaled a 5-story building to deliver the world's creepiest midnight snack attack. While Shintaro panics and explains that there is making an entrance, and then there is hovering above someone like a glamorous sleep paralysis demon, Toa mistakes the late-night visit as friendly company and starts to treat Lilishka like a guest, but Shintaro is quick to try and shut that down, calling her a biohazard. When he eventually fails, he ends up delivering a masterclass in boundary issues, with Lilishka's sniff requests escalating from awkward to restraining order territory while maintaining the audacity to claim she was a vampire who respected boundaries and never sucked the blood of someone who did not give her proper and informed consent. However, everything changes when she starts demonstrating her floating and extending her fangs, which would have been convincing according to Shintaro, if not for the way she kept adjusting her contacts like a college theater major between a pretentious monologue. Things hit rock bottom in Shintaro's head with her confession about wearing European-style lenses to appear like a more authentic vampire, similar to the ones she saw in anime and movies, essentially admitting to supernatural cultural appropriation. Shintaro thought about how nothing kills vampire mystique faster than a vampire with a wardrobe full of hot topic statement pieces. But the standoff reached its inevitable conclusion when sheer exhaustion at the late hour forced a 3-way bed-sharing situation that no one signed up for, with Lilishka still mumbling snack requests like a supernatural vending machine stuck on repeat. The next morning brought blessed relief in the form of an empty apartment. Though Toa's sudden panic about vampires exploding in the sun sent Shintaro into a downwards spiral imagining ash piles on his balcony, but things clear up at school by lunchtime when the goth vampire loli drops like a bombshell, while he is sitting outside for his meal, casually licking teriyaki sauce off his cheek like it was normal behavior. Now sporting a school uniform and revealing that she was a student in the same year but different class as Shintaro and her actual name was Sayuri. Shintaro is not impressed and tries to get far away from her, but his futile attempt at subtle peace backfired when some of his classmates pointed out Sayuri's poorly executed stalking and stakeout outside his classroom, and Tsugumi commented on how her bunny-eared hoodie was doing zero favors for stealth. Later that day, just when Tsugumi's study notes offered a return to normalcy for the loser, while simultaneously reminding Shintaro of the upcoming exams he was sure to tank unless he studied, a bad familiar named Mafu showed up with a letter of invitation for Shintaro, who had just about had enough with the freak encounters. As he began following the clearly not ominous at all winged rodent, he was led to an abandoned clubroom where Sayuri had prepared what Shintaro thought of as the world's worst job offer of offering eternal servitude in exchange for imaginary birthday party tickets that may or may not happen. However, her emotional breakdown upon him saying no revealed the tragic truth about how she'd misinterpreted Shintaro's very reasonable no-sniff stance as personal rejection, proving to Shintaro that even self-proclaimed vampires aren't immune to middle school level drama. Just when things were about to boil over and turn messy, the intervention squad arrived in the form of Tsugumi and Noel, whose synchronized WTH expressions at Sayuri's aerial acrobatics would have been gold if not for Tsugumi's visible heartbreak at being the only normie in Shintaro's increasingly bizarre harem. Noel and Sayuri quickly go from being standoffish to becoming besties and acknowledging that neither of them thought the other mythical creature existed, and in the end, Shintaro reluctantly compromised and allowed the goth loli to visit his place every now and then as long as she used the front door and did not try to drain him into a raisin. While she folds the laundry and looks out the window, the following day, Toa realizes this is the first time the weather's changing ever since she came to Earth. Meanwhile, in the occult research club room, Shintaro and his friends take a breath of relief after finally getting done with the exams, but they didn't expect to be spending so much time in that room since over a week ago. Shintaro's harem of baddies begged him to study together, but he was hesitant to do it at his place because of Toa. So it was Sayuri who suggested studying in the occult research club room. It was Madame Tsumugi who had carried most of the loser load, and Shintaro agrees that if it weren't for Tsumugi, then they would have failed. Everyone is grateful, but Shintaro's words catch her attention as she gets riled up. Realizing this is the first time he called her Tsumugi, and in her panic, asks everyone to bail before the club members got angry. As they decide to leave, Noel suggests going to a cafe on the way. Shintaro agrees and invites Sayuri by calling her real name, who responds by striking a JoJo-level pose, not allowing the disrespect. She asks them to call her Lalishka, explaining the origins, and when called out for being a sham, Sayuri once again strikes a dramatic pose and says she's the one who chooses her name. And then it becomes clear to Shintaro that Sayuri and Noel are on the same wavelength when she starts to nerd out about Val Helsing's vampires. As they're about to leave and open the door, a strange girl slips and falls right in front of Shintaro. The girl falls to the floor. As she looks at Shintaro, tears start to flood her eyes, and she starts crying. Sayuri introduces her as Hisui, the other member of her club. Shintaro sees the girl terrified and tries to introduce himself to make things smooth. But Hisui hides behind Sayuri, which makes him think she hates him. Sayuri dramatically explains that Hisui hates humans and can't stand them, but Hisui argued she's just a little girl who's shy and suffers from social anxiety, and as they take their leave, Shintaro asks Sayuri if she wants to go with them. Hisui is shocked when Sayuri agrees and drags her along, explaining to them that the occult research club had only third-year members, and after they graduated, it would have gone poof. But then Hisui and she joined. However, the club would dissolve without new members, which Shintaro doesn't see the problem with. Sayuri tries to convince Shintaro into joining with Mafu, air conditioning, and soft drinks, who finds it tempting but still refuses to join. However, Noel and Tsumugi also wanted to join if Shintaro did. Hisui hides behind Sayuri once again when Shintaro tries to talk to her. So he tries to get her to talk about her interests, but seeing her burst into tears after talking to the Virgin makes Shintaro think she hates him for sure, and he should stop talking to her. But then Sayuri tells him she likes books, but she hates people sitting beside her in the library, so she reads in the club room. As they stop to decide where to celebrate and start thinking of a few places, some kids passing by catch their attention. The festival on the other side excites everyone, and Hisui, too, comes out of her shell seeing the festival. But she hides behind Sayuri again when she sees Shintaro. They walk through the festival, cherishing the exciting moment with their friends. Hisui reveals that she also likes the festivals, especially the summer ones. Shintaro notices that Sayuri is nowhere to be found, but then he sees her all covered up in festival food and items. Sayuri dramatically tells Shintaro that she can see something bothering her. So Shintaro explains that he feels like Hisui is scared of him and not of the other girls. Sayuri teases him that maybe it's because he saw something. Hisui and Shintaro both freak out and explain that it's not that. But then Noel explains that it was completely normal. Shintaro's desperate attempt to please Hisui continues to push her back. But then Tsumugi saves the day and suggests splitting up to eat something. Noel grabs Shintaro in excitement and runs to get food with him, leaving the other three. While the others enjoy food and festival glamour, Sayuri decides to go hunting. She opens her eye patch, aims for the target, but misses the teddy bear. Meanwhile, Hisui is in awe seeing some glowing balls in a pond. Noel raves about some potatoes and the girls follow suit. Seeing that the girls were eating, Shintaro decides to get something himself. As he takes a stroll, he finds grilled corn, a staple summer food. But as he continues to walk, chilled cucumber grabs his attention. Right when he thinks about getting a cucumber, Hisui walks in, gobbling the cucumbers with her eyes in awe. He startles her once again by talking to her. Shintaro buys one for himself and one for Hisui and lets her eat alone. As he starts to walk away, Hisui gathers some courage and mumbles that he had the wrong idea. But just as she's about to clarify, the other girls call Shintaro and interrupt them. As the sun is about to set, they all decide it's time to go home. Shintaro looks back on his day. He didn't expect to have so much fun and enjoy the summer festival after exams. However, he misses Toa even more and decides to come back with her. Suddenly, Hisui shifts everyone's attention to Sayuri, who dramatically starts talking about the sun setting and the moon rising. Noel thinks the scene looks like one of the B-tier scary anime. Sayuri continues to chant and starts to slowly step forward. Just as she reaches the edge of the bridge, Shintaro sees her. He runs to save her. Sayuri steps off the bridge. Shintaro jumps behind her, forgetting she could fly and falling down in the river. While everyone just panics, Hisui steps forward and jumps into the river. As Shintaro starts to sink to the bottom of the river, a hand reaches out to him and he sees Hisui rescuing him. After coming out of the river, Hisui finally gathers the courage to tell him that she isn't used to talking to boys and that's why she's nervous around him. They both apologize to each other and sort things out. But right in that moment, a light starts to glow around Hisui, and a halo appears around her head. At first, they think she's an angel, but then a shell appears behind her back, and they realize she's a kappa. Tsumugi passes out after finding out the truth, but Sayuri explains that she didn't tell them because Hisui didn't allow her, explaining that she turned into a kappa if she got wet within an hour of eating cucumbers. Hisui is shy, but everyone accepts her, and moments later, Toa arrives and meets Hisui and gets so excited her wings come out. Later, Shintaro starts telling Toa about his day and how he got angry, but then realizes he's never seen Toa angry. Toa tries to tell him about all the times she got angry, but as she tries to remember, she realizes that she has never been angry. At first, Shintaro thinks it's because she's an angel, but then he realizes he knows an angel with quite the temper issues. Shintaro gets taken away by the soup's aroma, so Toa gives him some to taste. But she notices Shintaro's hands full with dishes, so she tries to feed him. Shintaro gets shy, so he puts down the dishes and takes the vegetables from her. As he tastes the food, he realizes Toa isn't just an angel. She's an angel who happens to be a literal angel. On their way home after the term is over, Noel notices a new cake shop. She gets hyped, grabs Shintaro's arm, and drags him inside the shop to check out the new place. Meanwhile, Toa, who happened to pass by, sees Shintaro with his friends. She gets excited, and just as she's about to call his name, she sees Noel extend sweets to feed him. Her excitement turns to sadness and anger when she remembers he refused to eat with her hands. However, she didn't catch the full picture. Shintaro refuses to eat with Noel's hands too. As Shintaro gets home and tells Toa he brought her a cake, he finds her sitting in a corner. He thinks she's not well or upset with him. However, not even Toa herself knows how she feels. She wonders if it's jealousy, but then agrees to eat the cake. As they enjoy the cake, Shintaro tells Toa he went to the cake shop with Noel and Tsumugi, but he liked it and wanted to try it with her. He further tells her that since he's on summer break, they can go out somewhere. However, he was still a broke loser, so they can only go out on walks, or to someplace not too expensive. Toa likes the idea but tells him she's happy just by living with him too, which proves Shintaro's point that she's an angel and a literal angel. Meanwhile, Noel watches a movie and is reminded of her childhood. She remembers how she had trouble making friends, and maybe she isn't fully over it yet. But now, she goes to school and works part-time, and she has a friend, Shintaro, who's better than 100 friends. As Noel scrolls through her phone, she sees a movie that she wanted to watch and decides to surprise Shintaro at his work and go to the movies with him. The next day, Noel visits Shintaro at his work. As she approaches him, she sees that the rest of their friends are already there. Shintaro thinks she's there as a customer, but Noel tells him she needs to talk to him about something. Since his shift ends at 3, she asks Shintaro if he wants to join her for a movie. However, Shintaro tells her he's covering for someone else, so he'll be free after 6. He suggests rescheduling, but today's show is the last. Tears fill up Noel's eyes, but then Sayuri remembers Hisui has read the book but has never watched the movie. All the girls step in to save the day and offer to go with Noel. However, Noel wanted to do something friendly with her friend Shintaro, and now she's stuck with other people. Meanwhile, it's Toa's first time going to the cinema, so the girls explain all the rules to her. They get some food and popcorn before the movie starts and head inside the cinema room. As they start to explain the rules, Toa grabs Noel's hand because darkness scares her. The movie starts with a kid enjoying the serene view of the river. He hears a voice out of nowhere. He looks around to see, but only finds a cat in front of him. At first, he ignores it because cats can't talk, but to his surprise, it was the cat talking. The cat, without explaining anything, takes him to the rumored haunted house. The kid follows the cat as it walks inside. He walks up the stairs, the day turns to night. A gloomy blue light fills the air, and a girl appears out of nowhere. Noel and Toa share popcorn while enjoying the movie. The main characters run as the movie reaches its climax. The suspense continues to grow, causing the girls to be at the edge of their seats. At last, the movie ends, and Noel and Toa realize they've never watched a movie like this. However, Noel wanted to watch it with Shintaro. Sayuri, as if she heard everyone's thoughts, suggests watching the movie with Shintaro once it releases to stream. Noel and Tsumugi cheer in sync out of excitement, and they plan to discuss it more when they meet Shintaro. As they walk back home, Toa can't stop talking about the movie, while Noel can't stop thinking about Shintaro. However, as a reader of the source material, Hisui thinks they skipped some stuff, but got the story right. She explains how the cat was speaking the original story's older sister's line. The discussion catches Noel's attention, and she starts talking about the movie too. Realizing they're completely drawn into the story, they decide to sit down and reveal their unemployed nerdy colors. As they continue to talk about the movie's story and details, Noel realizes she's having fun even without Shintaro. The girls start to thank her because she's the reason they got to have so much fun. Noel feels ashamed that she got jealous of Shintaro's friends and acted like a child because she had so much fun with them just now. She thanks everyone for joining her even though they're not friends. Hearing "not friends" leaves everyone shocked because to them, Noel is a friend. Noel freaks out not knowing how friendships work, and she didn't even ask them to be her friend. Tsugumi explains to her that they're all friends even if she didn't ask. Noel runs away crying in happiness. She's happy that she made friends, and it's all thanks to Shintaro. However, she wonders if they're friends for her the same way she is with Shintaro because with him, she feels different. Right at that moment, she sees Shintaro in front of her. She realizes she feels different about him and tells Shintaro that she believes he's not just her friend but her bestie. Before Shintaro could say anything, the girls interrupted them. Shintaro doesn't answer and joins them while Noel is standing, wondering if she's right about besties. Later that night, the air conditioning in Shintaro's apartment is busted, so he and Toa are chilling in the bathtub to avoid the heat getting to them when Shintaro catches a peek of Toa's exposed thighs and all the blood rushes to his nether regions, and before he can have a virgin meltdown, Sayuri shows up at the apartment window with an invitation for summer camp at Hisui's place, which Shintaro accepts mainly because of the air conditioning and memories. However, as Shintaro and Toa stand outside a giant building the next day, they fail to understand if they're going to meet the others on top, but then, a guard calls their name and invites everyone in, and when Shintaro sees the helicopter on the rooftop, he freaks out over the luxury as Hisui welcomes them. After recovering from the excitement of the helicopter ride, they wonder how Hisui is so rich, but then remember the super rich grandpa. As they walk inside their camp spot, they're welcomed by the twin maids Kujaku and Aoi who give them the details on their background, and while everyone falls in awe of the huge place, the maids mock them and explain to them that this is the smallest of their vacation homes. They find a beautiful pond to gush over which the maids explain was built by a Hisui in the Edo period. Kappas controlled water, and that power came in handy when building an empire. However, the pond has a sad story around it about two lovers who tried to exchange their shirikadama out of love and met their maker. The legend is, whoever confesses their love to each other by the pond lives together forever. The maids awkwardly explain that shirikadama is found in an orifice in the lower half of a person. After the maids leave, Sayuri starts the occult club's summer camp, telling everyone she has an activity planned after dinner, so they're free until then. It's not even lunchtime yet, so everyone thinks she has something fun planned. But Sayuri shuts that down because in the Hisui family, everyone likes sumo wrestling. So the maids offer to show them a match, but Shintaro refuses. So the maids ask them if they want to swim in the ocean. The girls get excited seeing a room full of swimsuits. Shintaro decides to leave them to try on their clothes and asks the maids about swimsuits for men. The maids get shocked hearing that Shintaro is a man with a wiener and start to swarm and worship him. Meanwhile, at the beach, the maids apologize to Shintaro because they thought he was a macho queen who belonged to a rich family, but her parents raised her as a boy. It took them by surprise because they didn't think Hisui would be friends with a boy. The maids explain that Hisui will take over as Japan's #1 kappa one day, and she has to remain pure to get the shirikadama, and because of that, she has always been surrounded by girls. Shintaro wonders if he should be staying here, but then Toa catches his attention. Seeing her in a swimsuit, Shintaro doesn't know where to look because she's an angel. But then, the other girls come out too. However, Tsumugi feels insecure because she didn't know she would be going to the beach with Shintaro. Noel gets excited about playing beach volleyball, but Shintaro refuses her. While he blushes thinking about them, Sayuri brutally humbles him with an all-black swimsuit. A beach sun is too much for a vampire, so she's wearing a full swimsuit by the Hisui Enterprises. Noel grabs Shintaro's arm and takes him to the beach. The other girls follow them behind. After having fun with the beach volleyball, they decide to take a break and enjoy the barbecue. While enjoying barbecue, Noel tells Shintaro about Toa's reaction to seeing the ocean for the first time. She couldn't believe all of it was salt water and thinks it's full of salt packets. Although Hisui and Shintaro are talking now, she still gets startled when Shintaro calls her. To break the ice, he asks her if he can call her Hisui, which only causes more panic for Hisui. But then, she agrees. However, when Shintaro calls her Hisui, she runs to Sayuri because she has never been called by her first name, and it was awkward for her. As Toa sits down with Shintaro, she tells him about her first ever experience with the beach. She's taken in awe with how the ocean sparkles and how the sand feels. However, she finds swimsuits a little embarrassing and uncomfortable. While they enjoy the setting sun and talk about how fun their summer vacation was, the maids bring them towels and ask them if they want to bathe in the hot spring. However, it's a shame that they only have hot springs for men since they only have women in the house, so Shintaro will have to use the well for now. Noel asks Shintaro when he will come to take a peek, thinking it's a normal thing, but then realizes it was yet another fiction. After Shintaro cleans himself at the well, Sayuri appears out of nowhere, shows him her swimsuit, and leaves. Meanwhile, the girls enjoy the hot spring and wonder why it's named after Hisui. Sayuri explains to them that the Kappa leader made it for Hisui's first bath. Noel gets completely red and wishes Shintaro had joined them. Tsumugi starts to imagine them bathing with Shintori and quickly regrets it. While Sayuri tells them about washing their hair, something else grabs Tsumugi's attention. Noel, being the innocent one, asks her if she wants to touch when she catches her staring. Tsumugi freaks out of embarrassment while Sayuri feeds the innocent girls lies about the Japanese tradition of women touching each other. Noel realizes yet another thing she thought to be real was purely fiction. Sayuri tells Hisui that they'll grow too, but Hisui fails to understand what she means. Suddenly, it starts to snow because of Noel took the comment to heart, and when the girls start to take forever, and Shintaro starts getting bored, the maids offer wrestling again, but he refuses. The maids tell him that they've thought about him staying and decided to forget that he's a man because Hisui is having fun. However, they will not take it lightly if he does anything to her. After a fun day, they eat their dinner and play cards. However, they keep falling asleep during the game, so Shintaro suggests sleeping. While the girls sleep together, Shintaro is left alone. Being unable to sleep, he remembers the maid said he could use the bath after dinner. He walks out to the hot bath and is instantly taken away by the vibe. As Shintaro steps into the bath, he suddenly sees Hisui already sitting there. He decides to run away out of embarrassment, but Hisui tells him she can be on the other side. They both regretted the impulsive actions, but then Hisui calls him and thanks him for coming to the camp because he brought the party with him, and Shintaro realizes how much she loves Sayuri and thinks she joined school for her. But Hisui tells him that she joined because she found an oracle. In middle school, she saved an old lady from drowning who suggested exposure to males for new experiences. She handed her over some talisman to up her luck with men. The Kappa takes things with water seriously, which is why she decided to join the co-ed school, but she couldn't get used to it. But then, she found Shintori and the others and realized she was right about choosing this school. Hearing Hisui's story made the camp worth it for Shintori. As he walks back to his room, the maids catch him for betraying his word. As a punishment, they turn him into their sumo sparring partner. After the tiring sparring session with the maids, Shintaro goes to his room to sleep. He falls on his bed and says goodnight to Toa out of habit. However, before he could sleep, Sayuri, with her sudden entry, startles him and calls him for the devil summoning. As everyone gathers still half sleepy, Sayuri shows them the summoning book. She and Hisui tried to do it before but failed, and she thinks with the others it will work. Sayuri tells them the phrase to chant and tells them there's no knowing what might appear. It is called a demon summoning, but it is a call to all spiritual beings. A spirit could show up instead of a devil, depending on what being has the most desire to come. Shintaro, too, like everyone else, starts to build interest. However, like all rituals, this one requires a sacrifice. Before chanting, they have to sacrifice a dark hen that has never laid an egg, but Sayuri feels bad, so she decides to use a charred chicken-shaped cookie instead. The ritual begins. Sayuri sacrifices the chicken cookie, and the wind blows in suspense. Sayuri starts to chant the summoning phrase, and everyone chants with her. As they continue to chant, the wind starts to blow in circles. They continue to chant, and suddenly, the wind gets strong. A small tornado appears and then quiets down. Suddenly, a little baby angel appears before them but soon disappears. While the other girls get excited that it worked, Sayuri passes out. It turns out Shintaro and Toa recognize the angel as Shiyu-chan. Sayuri gets up and thinks that maybe the reason an angel appeared is because another angel already existed here. However, they know it works, so now they can start again. The summoning has everyone excited, and the girls decide to officially join the club. Meanwhile, the little angel wonders if she was seeing things. The girls feel more awake than ever after the summoning and want to do more things. Noel suggests fireworks and explains to Toa what they are because she doesn't know. However, they don't have any fireworks. But then the maids save the day and reveal a room full of fireworks. They all enjoy the fireworks. Shintaro helps Toa light up her fireworks. While he struggles with the lighter, Toa gets worried about the explosion, but Shintaro assures her it won't explode. Shintaro holds the sparkly fireworks to light it up and hands it over to Toa. The beautiful sparkles completely take over Toa, and she starts to admire them while Shintaro stares at her. However, Tsumugi, who kept watching them, couldn't help but feel jealous. Shintaro joins Noel and Tsumugi and notices that they've been calling each other by their first names. It hits a nerve with Tsumugi when Noel says she does it out of habit because of Shintaro. Tsumugi starts blushing, imagining using her first name with Shintaro. She calls out his first name, but he tells her he feels better the way it was. As Shintaro lights up their fireworks, Tsumugi realizes how close yet apart they are but decides it's better that way for now. As they all play with the fireworks, Shintaro stands staring at Toa and realizes how much he loves summer vacations now. As they reach the station, Toa gets excited, not just about Skytree, but about getting to spend a day with Shintaro. Seeing the huge tower takes Toa by surprise. Shintaro explains to her all the shows she watches come from this tower. They head inside the mall and see a yukata rental store and decide to check it out. Shintaro starts blushing seeing how cute Toa looks, and he's not the only one. People walking around get taken away by her beauty too. Shintaro checks prices for the observatory and decides that since he's here, they should go all the way. However, to their disappointment, the gallery is closed today. Toa realizes it costs money and decides that some radishes would be better. But then, she freaks out and starts to take off her clothes when she realizes yukata costs money too. Shintaro tells her that he wanted her to wear a yukata and he wanted to go to the observatory with her. They take the elevator to the observatory. Toa finds the open city skyline beautiful. Shintaro realizes angels have really good eyesight when Toa points out someone reading a book down in the city. Toa didn't know why the other humans were scared. She freaks out when she learns that humans can't fly and can die if they fall from a height. Shintaro tells her that there's no need to be scared because she will save him if he falls. Shintaro explains to Toa that all the people carrying bags are back home to see their family. Toa asks him if he misses his family, but he tells her they're all abroad. With each other's company, they both don't feel lonely. Next, they decide to get lunch outside. They see some places, eat food, and visit museums. As they walk through the crowd, Shintaro loses Toa in the crowd. Toa starts to look around and searches for him everywhere, but then Shintaro grabs her. To avoid getting lost, they grab each other's clothes. Shintaro thinks they could have held hands, but things get weird every time. After night falls, they decide to grab dinner before going home. But then Toa gets sad and stops. She doesn't want to go home because she was having fun. Shintaro consoles her that they have so many places to visit during the summer break. He then shows her the artifact she liked at the shop. The silence makes him think she doesn't like it, but then Toa thanks him. She wishes to pay him back but doesn't know how. Suddenly, a realization strikes her, and she runs. They get into a dark alley. Toa asks Shintaro to close his eyes. She slowly steps forward. Shintaro thinks she's going to kiss him. He freaks out and opens his eyes only to realize that he's floating in the sky. He continues to scream out of fear, but Toa calms him down. She tells him she wanted to repay him for the snow globe. Shintaro looks around and realizes how the angels see the world. When Toa first came to this world, she was excited and worried. But it's because of Shintaro that she got to see so many places, meet people, have friends, and feel the warmth of the world. She hopes to continue learning about the world with Shintaro. If you watch till the end, confuse the normies by commenting Noel the Bipolar Ice Queen. If you enjoy anime recaps like this, do not forget to check out this video right here.